This is a CNBC original.
In this episode of American Greed, Marcus Schranker. Remember this guy?
The plane crashed in Milton, Florida, Sunday night.
He was a stunt pilot.
Basically, it's a very high G routine that has a lot of gyroscopic precession.
I've seen him do a few things in the airplane that were, boy, this guy knows what he's doing.
And clients say a con man.
People trusted him, in some cases with $1 million.
Who had the country wondering for days whether he was dead or alive.
Long range, I think we're in for a tough haul.
The American economy is in trouble.
January of 2009. The nation is reeling from the worst financial meltdown since the Great Depression.
And there is an astounding decline in business in the country.
On Wall Street, the stock market is in free fall. On Main Street, home prices are plummeting. And inside a $1 million house near Indianapolis, a money manager named Marcus Schranker is ignoring the phone that rings off the hook.
Many of his clients were expressing concern about the rather dour economic outlook, and then they began contacting Marcus, and suddenly they weren't able to get a hold of him. He wasn't returning their phone calls. He'd have all kinds of excuses why he couldn't get in touch with them.
On January 11th, 2009, Schranker tells his family he's going on a brief trip. An avid pilot, he boards his single-engine Piper Malibu, planning to fly solo to Florida.
There was an enormous amount of stress in the weeks and days leading up to his flight to Florida. It was a very stressful period for him that he was on medications, and as he said, he was not in his right mind.
Schranker lifts off around 6:30 p.m. With just a little under 2 hours into the flight, he sends out a Mayday call.
I've got my windshield is cracking. Sorry, windshield is gone into my deck. You're going towards the Gulf now, you say? I'm bleeding profusely.
And that's the last communication Marcus Schranker had with the Coast Guard.
30 minutes later, Schranker's plane crashes in a wooded area near Milton, Florida. Rescue crews arrive, but the twisted wreckage they find doesn't match the distress call. The plane's windshield is intact. There's no blood. And more importantly, there's no pilot. As his face is splashed on TV screens around the world, a fascinated public wonders, where is Marcus Schranker? Is he dead or alive? Schranker grows up in a small town in Indiana. From the beginning, he seems restless, always in a hurry to get somewhere else.
If I could take a snapshot of him, it'd be that he was climbing all the time, trying to climb all the time, going somewhere.
In 1996, Schranker graduates from Purdue University, having studied both financial planning and aviation. Just out of school, he launches Heritage Wealth Management, a financial planning firm focused on low-risk investments.
So they were fairly safe investments to be handled. Qualified money in retirement accounts and things like that that really couldn't be manipulated or done badly with.
Schranker's money management business grows. He marries, has kids, and settles into the Geist neighborhood north of Indianapolis, a moneyed enclave of the city's elite.
You know, Geist is an interesting place. You have a lot of new money. You have a lot of people who are doctors and lawyers and athletes. And so they're kind of drawn, I think, because of the opulence, the extravagance of the homes out there, and because of the lake. There's no denying that there's a lot of wealth out there, and I think people are attracted by that.
Always one to hunt for new investment clients, Schranker uses his love of aviation to make friends with some commercial pilots and manage their retirement accounts.
Pilots. Marcus was a pilot. There was an automatic sort of entree-vous for him. He was able to get in there and meet these people, get on their good side, trust me, I'll do the right thing for you.
In 2002, Mike Kenny's brother, a commercial pilot, introduces him to Mark Schranker. Kenny has a significant investment portfolio and is looking for a new money manager.
He seemed like a very intelligent, very knowledgeable person about what he was talking about. He proclaimed that we only put our clients in the best of the best. Best of the best. That was a term was used quite a bit.
Schranker tells Kenny he makes money only from a flat percent he charges clients. It sounds like a good arrangement.
You pay me for my performance, fee-based advice. He declared very much up front, I do not make commissions on anything I sell. And that was the relationship that I'd come from the previous advisor, and that was one of the things I was uncomfortable with. So that really tickled my ear. And I liked the idea that he would be paid based on how well he did for me and how well he managed my investments. That's what I wanted, and he was very big in saying that.
Schranker says he only makes money if his clients make money, taking the standard 1%. Before long, Mike, his brother, and several relatives all have their money managed by Schranker.
Very safe funds that had good return values on them. And that was what attracted me.
As Kenny will later find out, Schranker is doing precisely the opposite of what he's promised. Rather than investing in mutual funds and charging no commissions, Schranker is putting Kenny's money into annuities, low-risk insurance products with high commissions for the selling agent. And worse, investigators say Schranker is churning, moving Kenny's money from account to account, maximizing his commissions.
Churning is usually a behavior by agents where they put money into an annuity and then they go ahead and surrender it within, a couple of years and put it into yet another annuity.
Churning costs his clients huge surrender fees for early withdrawal, but Schranker seems blinded by greed.
Marcus Schranker can earn anywhere from 6 to 18% of the contract value on commissions, so each and every annuity that they sell, they get that commission.
Schranker's scheme is bringing in lots of money, but he wants more. And like magic, opportunity knocks on his door. Rumors are flying that Delta Airlines will be filing for bankruptcy. Its home base is in Atlanta, the busiest airport in the world. Suddenly, thousands of pilots will be nudged into early retirement and given lump sum payouts.
There's nothing more scary than having 7 figures of money and not knowing what to do with it. So I started asking around, hey, do you have a guy that's doing your money? And one of my favorite co-pilots, he said, I would trust him with my kids. That's how much I trust this guy. And I said, who was that guy? It was Marcus Schranker.
Dave Smith is one of those pilots. He flew for Delta for almost 29 years. He's educated and well-trained. But he'd be the first to admit that he has more money than financial savvy. When he sits down with Marcus Schranker, his financial unease seems to disappear.
It's funny how the mind works. You think you're above all this stuff, but the guy just flew it in an airplane you'd give your right arm to own, and he's wearing the right shoes and the good Rolex, and sits down and talks quietly and has all the answers. Wow, I'm glad to have him on my team, Yeah.
Schranker signs Smith up, but there are many more Dave Smiths to put on his dance card.
There were 7-figure crops to be harvested out of this retiring group of guys, and all he had to do was get here, get among it. So he literally moved to Atlanta.
Next on American Greed, when Marcus Schranker hits financial turbulence, his clients get white-knuckled and want to know, where's their money?
You've been charged those surrender charges. That money is gone forever.
In 2005, Marcus Schranker's financial planning business is taking off. He's tapped into a rich vein, managing the retirement funds of former airline pilots.
Marcus had a relationship. He could go down there and they could talk about things that his clients loved, and they were Delta pilots. And then, of course, hey, I'm an investment representative.
According to Schranker, he has almost 500 clients, and he's managing well over $6 million. Business is so good, Schranker moves his family to Atlanta, a city teeming with retired Delta Airlines pilots.
I think he went down there because there was money to be made.
Schranker pitches himself as a low-key guy with a cautious approach to investing. He gives all his clients the same pitch. He doesn't charge commissions, only a standard 1% management fee. And he puts their money into low-risk mutual funds. Mike Kinney has more than $500,000 with Schranker.
It was the majority of my net worth, both liquid and in, like retirement type stuff. He proclaimed he was going to put it in very safe funds that had good return values on them. And that was what attracted me.
Dave Smith, the retired Delta pilot, has given Schranker $1 million to invest. Smith says Schranker used fear to lure him in, talking doom and gloom.
We've got the Olympics coming up, and we've got a presidential election coming up. Our intelligence department tells us there could be a major terrorist attack in any one of those things. If that happens, this market is going to go through the floor.
He then offers a financial security blanket.
We've got to do something to protect your money. I've got a plan. I think I can get you in. We heard last it was closed, but I think I can get you in this. So now you're just in a total panic mode. What am I going to do? What am I going to do? Well, it turns out, under the wire, we're going to be able to get into this investment.
Schranker describes the investment as a type of mutual fund that will never make less than 3% a year, even in the worst of times. Smith hands over his entire nest egg. The catastrophes never materialize. Instead, the stock market slowly climbs in 2003 and 2004. But Schranker is making money. His clients are too, and they're all getting along famously. Dave Smith lives in Roswell, Georgia, a city steeped in Civil War history.
And few people know that that Confederate gray was actually called Roswell gray. And they made those uniforms right here in town. So when he and the kids and wife came down here, we would go and look at this stuff. And there's beautiful streams with the waterfalls, and there were ruins, old Civil War ruins. And so we did a lot together.
But friends also notice quirks about his personality. For instance, he has almost no sense of humor.
Jokes would just zing by Marcus like he was in a battlefield. But he was a lucky guy in the battlefield because nothing ever hit him. And he actually had a fake laugh. And everybody in the room would be dying laughing over something going on, and he'd be, ha, 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 ha.
Schranker also seems obsessed with his personal appearance.
I've got a little beagle puppy. I defy anybody to come up with anything cuter than a brand new little beagle puppy. And that beagle puppy comes over to him and stands up and puts her little feet on his pants. And he jumped back and brushed his pants off, and he said, I'll never forget, he goes, "This is a $2,000 suit." And I thought, yeah, that's a $200 puppy. What do I care about your suit?
Smith shrugs it off as harmless vanity.
I think it came down to the fact that people trusted him. There was a level of trust that he was able to gain very quickly. A real talent for him.
But his clients are about to learn the consequences of trusting Marcus Schranker. Trouble appears in 2006, when Dave Smith opens his annual statement from the company Schranker has his money invested with. Smith's statement reveals that he's been charged more than $66,000 in surrender fees. Panicked, he calls Schranker.
What is that? Well, that's taxes. Taxes? What do you mean taxes? Well, Dave, you pay taxes on everything. It's just the way it is. Finally, I began to realize he is stammering. I decided to heck with it. I'm calling the company.
He's shocked to learn that he's locked into a 25-year annuity, and Schranker has withdrawn 30% of his money, $300,000, after only a year. The $66,000 isn't taxes, it's surrender fees for early withdrawal. Smith confronts Schranker.
Who told you that? He said. Well, a woman by the name of, I believe her name was Christy. She goes, oh, Dave, she's just a clerk. She doesn't know what this is. She thinks that you're an off-the-street investor. This thing is an institutional investment. There are no surrender charges. Look, I'll clear it up. I'll call her. Well, maybe I should call her back. No, I'll take care of it. I'll clear it up. And so I talked to her. It's fine. They're putting the money back. Everything's fine. Don't worry about it. Oh, whew, wow, okay, that's great.
Smith says he later called the insurance company again to confirm that the $66,000 had been refunded. The response was not the one he's hoping to hear.
Mr. Smith, you're in this annuity. It's this way. I don't know what this guy's telling you, but this is what it is. And you've been charged those surrender charges. That money is gone forever.
And it gets worse. Smith says without his knowledge, Schrenker has already moved $100,000 of his nest egg into yet another annuity. Every time he takes money out of one of Smith's annuities, Smith is hit with a big penalty, and Schrenker is on a roll. According to the Indiana State's investigators, he's moving Smith's money around like a pinball game. Every time he does it, he makes at least a 13% commission, and he does it over and over again.
When we began to peel back the layers of what he had done to us in the fall of 2006, we were sick. I mean, it was just a sickening feeling. Every family member, as we were confronted with what he was doing, refused to believe it. Even myself at first. It's like, I'm going, no, man, he wouldn't be doing that to us. I mean, it's Marcus. He's a good guy. But yet, it became undeniable.
Kenny loses $40,000 in surrender charges alone.
He was certainly willing to do anything it took to improve his financial situation at whatever cost.
All told, Schrenker has raked in almost $1 million churning accounts, leaving a wake of financial ruin in Atlanta. To this Southern group of clients, he's the equivalent of Civil War General William T. Sherman.
All the way through our relationship, and I mean literally till the day we parted, and even after that, he swore that he never made any commission on any products. And when our entire family terminated our relationship with him, that's when he began to move back up to Indianapolis. He saw that the writing was on the wall for Atlanta.
Next on American Greed, investigators say Schrenker starts a new scam. But will his past catch up with him?
Looking back on my relationship with Marcus, it was going to take jail to stop him.
Marcus Schrenker, a pilot and money manager, has beaten a hasty retreat from Atlanta. His clients, primarily a group of retired pilots, say they have discovered that Schrenker was churning their retirement accounts. He moves their money from account to account, raking in nearly $1 million in commissions and causing his clients to lose hundreds of thousands of dollars in early withdrawal fees. Schrenker moves his family back to their original home, an upscale suburb of Indianapolis called Geist. Tom Britt is a friend of Schrenker's and the publisher of a local newsletter. He says Schrenker celebrates his return by building a massive home on the Geist Reservoir.
It was almost a PR stunt, the rebranding of Marcus Schrenker in a lot of respects, because there'd been a lot of talk. Rumors had made their way around the lake. And it's almost like it went through a deep freeze over the winter, and he's coming back, and now he wanted to kind of reinvent himself.
And Schrenker's experience in Atlanta has not slowed him down. He still dreams of big money.
He came to me one day and said, there's like $14 billion of wealth in Geist, and I want to get as much of that under management as I can. I think he just realized that he had some connections. He knew some people. People knew him. I think he saw that as a fertile ground to set up shop.
In 2008, Schrenker adds another investment firm to his family of companies under the Heritage Wealth Management umbrella. He calls it the Icon Group. Promising sound financial planning, the Icon Group claims to have offices in Singapore, Sao Paulo, and London, among other cities. In reality, there's only one office, in a strip mall in Indianapolis.
His base companies were Heritage Wealth Management and Heritage Insurance Management, and he combined them into a group called the Icon Group. I find it rather ironic, Icon. Sometimes a name says it all.
Under the Icon name, Schrenker starts talking a new product, something he calls the Euro Fund. Schrenker tells investors that with the dollar in a steady decline, there's money to be made investing in European currency.
He would contact his clients and advise them what a great investment the euro would be, and that the euro was going to be very, very strong, and that was a great business opportunity.
Before long, Schranker has $1.5 million of clients' money in the Euro Fund, but his past is close behind. Schranker's victims of the Atlanta churning scam have no intention of giving up without a fight.
When we began to investigate what can we do about this, you begin to see that lawsuits are very expensive, very uncertain, and hard to do. So what can we do to keep him from doing that kind of thing to other people like us? Because we felt like he was going to keep on doing it.
We went to the Georgia Insurance Commission. They were, in a word, totally worthless. Totally worthless. Well, good luck. What are we going to do? What are we going to do? Indiana. What about Indiana Insurance Commission?
In the summer of 2007, Mike Kinney, Dave Smith, and several other retired pilots approached the Indiana Department of Insurance. They provide investigator Lisa Harpenow with evidence documenting Schranker's churning scam.
It was 5 or 6 page complaint. It referenced attachments and had notes on the attachments and basically walked me through everything that they'd went through. I knew that, okay, I think I've got some evidence now to file a statement of charges.
That's exactly what Harpenow does. And now Schranker is obliged to respond.
The responses definitely raised some red flags with me. One of his responses said, I didn't know there were surrender fees associated with these annuities. And I knew right there, either he's lying or he doesn't know how to sell an annuity, because any agent that sells annuities knows there's going to be surrender fees involved.
Schranker plays his best hand. His clients say he delays, drags his feet, and postpones meetings with regulators. He has good reason for his tactic. His Eurofund deal is paying off, and he's expanding his client base. For Marcus Schranker, the sky's the limit.
There we go. He's going to get lined up. He had what's called a unlimited routine. And basically, it's a very high G routine that has a lot of gyroscopic precession maneuvers in it.
I got to start it now. Here we go. Coming out for the milkshake. Woo!
People will look at my routine and they'll go, how could an airplane possibly do that? People are fascinated by flight. They love to come out, and especially kids. And there's nothing more wholesome than, a parent bringing out their kids for an air show.
Give Marcus Schranker a hand. I'll tell you what, I couldn't have done that. You get down there and land, you feel like you just spent about 2 hours in the waiting room.
Always eager to impress, Schranker's life in Geist is as choreographed as his aerial routines.
He would fly them in his airplane, show them his house out on Geist Reservoir, and appeared to have all the trappings of success. And that would play some factor in our victims deciding to invest their money with him.
I think part of what he had to do was live large to convince people that he's made it. You can trust him. He's doing something right, isn't he? Look at the car. Look at the house. Look at the planes. He's doing something right. That was part of it. But I think he was always just trying to stay one step ahead of it.
But scratch the surface, and it all falls apart. The $1.2 million house, it's mortgaged to the hilt. The cars, the lanes, they're all on banknotes.
When you look at all the trappings of success, it's much like a Hollywood set. Once you look behind that facade, you can see that it's really empty.
And a storm is brewing. Lisa Harpenow's investigation is growing, and Chief Deputy Prosecutor Jeff Waymiller is asking questions about Eurofund. To him, Schranker is starting to look like a Hoosier Bernie Madoff. He generates clients' Eurofund statements with an online investment tool. Every chart, every return, every number is pure fabrication.
Marcus would manipulate the numbers for this Euro account to show, not only to create the account, but also to show false returns.
And like a mini Madoff, he spends clients' money as though it were his own.
Well, the paper trail, according to the probable cause, pretty much ends when he was making personal payments on items such as his house, his cars, his airplane.
Waymiller and local police prepare for a search warrant of Schranker's home and office. But Schranker is oblivious to the impending storm. His life in Geist is a Midwest version of Margaritaville.
We live on a part of Geist Reservoir called Cocktail Cove, and it's known as being kind of the place where a lot of the boats congregate in the summer. We could have literally 200 boats in our backyard tied up on a Saturday and sometimes Sundays.
He had a boat, and what was unique about Marcus and his boat is he had a very nice big boat, but he also had this big floating trampoline. On any given Saturday or Sunday afternoon, you would see Marcus pull his boat out, and he would actually pull the trampoline behind him, and kids would swim up to it, and they'd jump on it, and they'd jump off the trampoline, jump back on. And so that was kind of a playful thing that he would do on the weekends.
But as the summer of '08 turns to fall, the markets implode. And so does Marcus Schranker. When American greed returns, Schranker takes a dangerous flight to escape his collapsing world.
I'm bleeding profusely.
Some huge companies in bad shape. There's fresh evidence tonight that much of the world is in this with us.
In late December of 2008, amid the global economic meltdown, the world of money manager Marcus Schranker is collapsing. Insurance regulators are closing in. They say they know that Schranker has churned clients' accounts, costing them hundreds of thousands of dollars in surrender fees. And now, criminal charges are in the works. Investigators believe his Euro fund is all smoke and mirrors, and Schranker is pocketing clients' money.
So someone would agree to invest with him based on skills that he represented, returns that he was supposedly getting other clients, and he would usually take that money and buy a home with it, buy a plane with it, buy nice cars with it.
On December 31st, 2008, a search warrant is served on Schranker's home.
Well, the search warrant authorized agents of the Secretary of State's office, with the assistance of the Indiana State Police, to seize any business records, computers, any information that would document the business activities of the heritage companies and Icon.
His wife, Michelle, is home. Schranker is gone. He's in Key West, shacked up with a girlfriend. It seems his business isn't the only thing that's crumbling. The day before the search warrant, Michelle files for divorce.
The perfect family was breaking up. Yes. And certainly Marcus Schranker left the impression that he had the perfect family with the perfect kids. However, he also had a woman on the side, his girlfriend.
Schranker's future looks bleak. Divorce, financial ruin, and prison.
My personal opinion is that he was a desperate man who lost everything, and he devised what he thought was an ingenious plan.
In early January 2009, Schranker plots an exit strategy. His scheme involves a plane, a parachute, and a motorcycle. On January 10th, Schranker drives from Indiana to the small town of Harpersville, Alabama.
The most interesting aspect about Harpersville, Alabama is the fact that it lies directly between Indiana and the Gulf of Mexico.
He's towing a trailer. Inside is a red Yamaha motorcycle.
When he reached Harpersville, he sought out a public storage unit, contacted the owner, and told this owner that he wanted to store his motorcycle for a few days.
Schranker stashes his motorcycle in Harpersville and returns home to Indiana. The next day, on January 11th, 2009, he tells friends and family he's flying solo to Destin, Florida, where his dad lives. The pressure must be intense because Schranker is acting erratically. Before he boards his plane, he texts a friend with a bizarre message.
Well, I can just tell you what he texted to his friend, that he was going to visit his father in Florida before entering into the witness protection program, according to his text.
That night, a clearly stressed-out Schranker is caught on camera, doing donuts at the airstrip where he keeps his plane. Moments after this is filmed, the troubled man who claims to be entering a witness protection program boards his plane and takes off. He's headed south. 2 hours into the flight, high above Huntsville, Alabama, Schranker sends a mayday call.
I've got my windshield is cracking. Sorry, windshield is gone into my deck. You're going towards the Gulf now, you say? I'm bleeding profusely.
He said that his cabin had lost pressure, that the windshield was cracking, and that he was losing consciousness. He then said something about blood being on the windshield, and that's the last communication Marcus Schrenker had with the Coast Guard.
Alarmed that the pilot is dead or disabled, the Navy dispatches 2 F-15s. The fighter pilots pull alongside Schrenker's plane in midair. The door is open. The cockpit is dark. The pilot is gone.
2 F-15 jet fighters were dispatched to intercept the airplane. Once the pilots arrived, they were able to report that there were no lights on and they weren't able to see any movement within the cabin.
Even without its pilot, the Piper Malibu continues its path south, but the stairs are down, creating drag. The plane is quickly running out of gas. Just across the Alabama state line, the plane crashes into a swamp, just a quarter mile from a subdivision.
After the airplane crashed, rescue workers were very quickly on site and were able to determine that there were no remains of the pilot. From that, they inferred that the pilot had jumped.
They're exactly right. Schrenker has jumped at 10,000 feet above central Alabama. The plan was to parachute into a sod farm, but he misses the mark and lands in a swamp near the Coosa River. Schrenker wades out and walks to the nearest house.
We are a sod farm in Harpersville. I think Marcus meant to land somewhere in this general area. As you can see, it's a good big target for somebody who knew what they were doing, which obviously Marcus didn't. He wound up landing actually on the other side of the river. And probably those were the lights that he could see at that home nearby. He just approached those lights, hoping he could get help.
He knocks on the door, soaking wet and covered in mud. He says he was canoeing in a nearby river. He capsized and lost his boat. The homeowner is skeptical and calls police. He then offers Schrenker a ride to the nearest convenience store.
You know, it was wintertime, and the story, according to this man, just sounded contrived. You know, sounded like he'd made it up.
Police arrive and talk to Schrenker, who surprisingly gives them his real name.
And he gave him the same story, basically, that he'd been separated from friends, canoeing. So the officer ran his driver's license on a national computer database. Information was there, but no red flags, no warrants, you know, nothing to show that anybody, any agency, law enforcement agency, had any interest in him.
At Schrenker's request, police escort him to a hotel in Harpersville. Security footage records Schrenker checking in, but Schrenker never intends to stay the night. Instead, he jogs half a mile down the road to the storage facility where his motorcycle is waiting, and he drives off into the night.
The plane crashed Sunday night.
The next day, the plane crash and the missing pilot are worldwide news.
Alabama authorities say that after checking into a hotel under a different name, Schrenker put on a black cap and moved into the woods, his plane hitting the ground miles away, empty.
In Harpersville, one of Chief Latimer's deputies remembers seeing Schrenker in town. U.S. Marshals are called.
With the information received from Birmingham that he was now operating a red Yamaha motorcycle, we had something to go on.
When American Greed returns, can the feds find a desperate Marcus Schrenker before he really does himself in? In Florida, plane piloted by money manager Marcus Schrenker has crashed, but there's no body. Many believe Schrenker faked his death.
He was flying one of his planes to Florida Sunday when authorities say they got a fake distress call, when his turboprop then crashed without him in it.
He didn't crash his airplane. One thing, the guy had no sense of humor. If his lips are moving, he's lying, but he was a good pilot.
David Smith is one of many retired commercial pilots who were scammed by Schrenker. Smith says he has good reason to be cynical.
Well, then the story began to unfold, and it was like, oh my God, and it was tempered with a little bit of laughter. I knew he was going to do something. And he did.
On January 13, 2009, less than 2 days after Schrenker's disappearance, his friend and confidant, Tom Britt, is glued to the TV, asking the question so many are asking: where is Marcus Schrenker? Then Britt checks his email.
I hit send and receive on my email, and an email pops up, and the subject line says, "From Marcus."
Looking for anyone to hear his side of the story, Schrenker reaches out to someone he thinks might be a sympathetic ear.
And he's trying to pass all the blame off onto someone else. And then he talks about his wife. And he says, she divorced me. I deserved it. He said, this is the last time I'm going to embarrass my family like this. And he said, by the time you read this, I'll be gone. Take care, Marcus. My immediate thought was, I got to get this to the police.
The U.S. Marshals are already hot on his trail.
Recovered from the wreckage of the airplane was the U.S. campground directory with the Florida page ripped out. We knew he was heading to Florida. We were able to determine how far he would have been able to travel, and our operational plan was to check all the campgrounds along the I-10 area.
Amazingly, the Marshals strike gold at the very first campsite they check, this KO8 campground outside of Tallahassee. The manager recognizes Schrenker as a guy who checked in last night, bought a bundle of firewood and a six-pack of beer. She directs the Marshals to his tent.
As we approached the tent and gave the verbal commands, he complied. He stuck both hands out of the open door flap. At that time, we saw the wound to his left wrist and saw the large amount of blood on his clothing, on the front of the tent, and we knew we had a medical situation.
Inside the tent, there's a pool of blood. Schrenker is in and out of consciousness, muttering, "Die, die." With authorities closing in, he has used a razor blade to slash his wrists. He has suffered massive blood loss, but doctors are able to save him just in time.
In my opinion, seeing him that night, the condition he was in, the two injuries, slits that he inflicted to himself, I don't think he would have made it through tonight.
If Marcus Schrenker was looking for an easy way out, he won't get it.
As soon as he recovers here, he's already facing felony charges of fraud and federal charges for causing his own plane crash.
Federal charges of intentionally crashing a plane are now added to a growing list of financial charges. And then there is the question of his wife, Michelle. She holds the title of chief financial officer in Schrenker's companies. A cloud of suspicion falls on her head.
That's what investigators have been very interested in. How much of a role did she play?
Shortly after her husband's arrest, Michelle Schrenker goes on the Today Show to talk about her role in the company.
When you hear, how much did you know, how aware were you of the severity of the financial problems?
I had limited duties there. All I did was help my husband out. I payrolled, and I did paid bills. That's all I did.
You were a bookkeeper?
I was a bookkeeper, but it wasn't what he wanted it for the image, for the marketing.
And Michelle, are you in contact with your husband? Have you spoken to him in jail?
I have. He has made his apologies to me. But right now, I'm just focusing on my kids and on what I need to do next.
Michelle Schrenker faces no criminal charges.
I think the focus now, to be honest with you, is on him. And I think the investigators in Indiana feel that if they're going to be charged against her, then so be it. And they're patient. They're willing to be patient and wait.
Federal authorities filed 2 charges against him. One, the intentional destruction of an aircraft. The other one was issuing a false distress call. And so we waited patiently until the federal court had finished with him.
Schrenker pleads guilty to the charges relating to the crash and receives 4 years in federal prison. As for the financial crimes, investigators believe Schrenker cleared more than $2 million between his annuity scam and the Eurofund scam. Looking back, Dave Smith realizes he should have seen the warning signs when his investment advisor became one of his closest friends.
The red flags that I should have seen were the ones that you really wouldn't think about seeing, and that's what makes the scheme work. You know, you've heard the expression, there's nothing new under the sun. There isn't. This is the same old trick. You know, you make friends with somebody. You're buddies, you're pals. Hey, let's go get a beer. Let's do this, let's do that. Before you know it, the guy's running around with your wife.
Dave Smith, Mike Kenny, and the other victims contact the companies whose insurance was sold by Schrenker, asking for their money back. At first, their pleas fall on deaf ears.
The money was acquired fraudulently. Not their fraud, but it was acquired fraudulently. They drug their feet, they fought. Suddenly, after refusal, suddenly said, fine, here's your money.
Tonight, he faces federal charges.
In an ironic twist of fate, Schrenker's high-profile escape benefits his churning victims.
His shenanigans with his airplane did us the biggest favor he could possibly do. Those companies did not want to be associated with such a bad news story, such a bad agent who was obviously caught guilty in doing such bad things. So they were very eager to cut their ties with him and with us in light of what he had done as their agent.
And one after another, the phone call would come in. Thank God I just got a check. I can't believe it, I just got a check. The check came in today, and we kept it up, and we kept it up, and we kept it up until everybody got their money back.
Victims of Schrenker's Eurofund scam are not as lucky. In that case, there are no insurance companies to cover the losses.
He had a very lavish lifestyle that required a lot of money to maintain. As far as we can tell, Mr. Schrenker was spending the money as quickly as he was taking it.
Schrenker is scheduled to stand trial in Indiana in 2010. He's facing multiple criminal charges, including 9 counts of fraudulent sale of securities.
He is charged with 11 Class C felonies. If the court were to sentence him to all the counts and run them consecutively to their maximum, he could serve up to 88 years.
Local NBC reporter Chris Prophet of WTHR has a chance to speak with Marcus Schrenker while he's behind bars in Indianapolis.
He does not take any responsibility for the loss of money. He said through a disclosure, these people knew exactly the risks that they were taking. He never once said that I took money that didn't belong to me. He said these were legitimate losses, in his words. So he doesn't take responsibility for any of that, and to this day maintains he hasn't stolen anything from anyone.
Marcus could be the friendliest guy. He's given me handfuls of gifts. He was always there to take you places, offers to, hey, I'm on my way, we're going to go to the football game tonight. And I liked him, but the bad side of him was he knew if he could just get his hands on money, he could be somebody. And I think that maybe there's that element for Marcus. Marcus wants to be somebody. But he's a story. He is a story.
Betrayal of the Saints, a novel of faith, fraud, and blood. Prologue, The Mirage. In the desert, the heat doesn't just burn, it vibrates. It creates a shimmering veil over the horizon, turning scorched asphalt into what looks like cool, blue water. They call it a mirage. It is a trick of the light, a promise of life where there is only sand and silence. Bill Kratz was a master of the mirage. To the thousands who gathered in the pews of Phoenix, he wasn't just a lawyer, he was a visionary. He spoke of stewardship, a word that tasted of ancient parchment and divine duty. To the elderly, the retired, and the struggling, he offered a way to build the kingdom of God while securing their own earthly comfort. But as the sun set on the Arizona Southern Baptist Convention, the blue water on the horizon began to evaporate, revealing the jagged, dry truth underneath. Chapter 1, The Oasis in the Desert. The diagnosis had arrived like a thief in the night. For Pat Anderson, the word aneurysm was a death sentence whispered in a sterile hospital room. Beside her, Bill Anderson, a man who had spent his life managing plants and machinery, felt a gear strip inside his own heart. "We need something more," Pat had whispered, her hand trembling in his. "We need to mean something." They found that meaning in the Southern Baptist Church. It was an oasis. The music was a balm, the community a fortress. When they were baptized, the water felt like a second birth. They weren't just Bill and Pat anymore. They were children of God, and they wanted to be good stewards of the life they had been spared. Then came the salesmen. They didn't look like wolves. They looked like deacons. They came into the churches with Bibles under their arms and brochures that promised a 10% return. Why leave your money with a secular bank that funds worldly vices? The salesman had asked, his voice smooth as honey tea. Invest with the Baptist Foundation of Arizona. Your interest builds your retirement, and our profits build senior housing. It's God's money doing God's work. Bill Anderson looked at the numbers. 6% at the bank, 10% at the BFA. It seemed like a blessing. "We're building the kingdom, Pat," he said, signing the papers. They moved $200,000, their entire life's work, into the hands of Bill Kratz. At the same time, across town, Robert Shaw was fighting a different demon. Alcohol had nearly drowned his mid-30s. The church had pulled him from the wreckage. For Robert, the BFA wasn't just an investment. It was a gratitude offering. He put in $250,000. He even set aside $60,000 for his daughter's education. He felt secure. He felt righteous. He didn't know that Bill Kratz was currently staring at a balance sheet that looked like a bloodbath. Chapter 2: The Architect of Shadows. Bill Kratz sat in his posh Phoenix office, the air conditioning humming a low, expensive tune. To the public, he was the Pope of the Southern Baptists. When he walked into a congregation, people stood. He was a financial genius, a man who could turn raw desert land into gold for the Lord. But the real estate bubble of the late 80s hadn't just burst. It had incinerated. "We can't report these losses," Tom, Kratz said, leaning back. Across from him sat Tom Grabinski, the in-house counsel. "If we show a loss, the investors flee," Grabinski replied, his eyes cold behind his glasses. "The foundation collapses. The ministries die. We'd be failing God." It was a dangerous logic, the idea that a holy end justified a dishonest means. And so, the bad bank was born. They called it Allo. It was a phantom, an off-the-books entity designed to swallow the foundation's failures. When a piece of land lost $5 million in value, they sold it to Allo at a profit. Where did Allo get the money? From the BFA. It was a circular flow of ghost money. It was a Ponzi scheme wrapped in a prayer shawl. As long as new investors, people like the Andersons and the Shaws, kept pouring their life savings into the BFA, the interest could be paid to the old investors. But the hole was getting deeper. By 1996, They were $340 million in the red. Chapter 3, The Whistleblower's Burden. Kyle Tresh arrived in Arizona with a heart full of idealism. The son of a preacher, he saw his law degree as a tool for ministry. Joining the BFA felt like a divine appointment. But within months, the smell of the books began to turn his stomach. He sat in a small, windowless room with for staff accountants. They looked like they hadn't slept in weeks. It's manufactured, one of them whispered, sliding a ledger across the desk. The profits don't exist, Kyle. It's all hollow. Kyle felt a cold sweat break across his neck. He went to Kratz. He expected an explanation, a misunderstanding. It's a long-term strategy. Kyle, Kratz said, his voice fatherly, echoing with the authority of the pulpit. Have faith. The properties will mature. You're looking at the world with the eyes of a lawyer, not a believer. I'm looking at it with the eyes of someone who knows the 9th commandment. Kyle replied, Thou shalt not bear false witness. In April 1996, Kyle Tresh did the hardest thing he'd ever done. He resigned. He wrote a letter accusing the foundation of fraud. He stepped out into the blinding Arizona sun, unemployed and shaken, wondering how a temple could be built on a foundation of lies. Chapter 4, The Paper Trail. Terry Green Sterling was not a Baptist. She was an investigative reporter for the Phoenix New-Times, and she had a nose for things that didn't add up. When a tip came in about the BFA, she spent 6 months in the basement of public record offices. She pieced together the money trail like a forensic pathologist. The more she dug, the more she saw the bad bank hollow. It was a graveyard of bad debts. When her series of articles hit the stands, Kratz didn't panic. He did something worse. He weaponized the faith of his victims. He sent a letter to the investors. These are wonderful days of blessing, he wrote, but they have not come without attacks from Satan, our spiritual enemy. In the churches, the pastors rallied behind him. When Robert Shaw brought the newspaper to his pastor, the man shook his head. Robert, I know Bill Kratz personally. He's a man of God. Don't let the secular media poison your spirit. The mirage held. For 3 more years, the BFA continued to solicit funds. They raised another $200 million while they were tanking abysmally, until the state of Arizona finally stepped in. Chapter 5, The Collapse. August 1999. The cease and desist order arrived like a thunderclap. The Baptist Foundation of Arizona was dead. The bankruptcy filings revealed a horror story. They owed 11,000 investors nearly $600 million. They had $250 million in assets, most of it junk land. Bill Anderson sat in his living room, the TV news flickering. He looked at Pat. It's gone, he said. The words felt like lead. Everything we worked for. All of it. He didn't just lose his money, he lost his health. Within 2 weeks, Bill had heart attacks. He spent his retirement in the garage, carving Uncle Sam lawn ornaments to sell for grocery money. Pat, at 70, became a caretaker for people younger than herself. Robert Shaw had to tell his daughter the tuition money was gone. He had to sell his house. He went from being a successful car salesman to washing cars at a rental agency. The anger was a slow-acting poison. I want to get back into a relationship with God, Robert would later say, his voice cracking. But they took away our faith in the church. In 2005, the trial began. It was the longest in Arizona history. Kratz and Grabinski sat at the defense table, unrepentant. They claimed that if the state hadn't shut them down, the real estate market would have saved them. The jury didn't buy it. Fraud isn't about the final outcome, it's about the lie told in the moment. Kratz was sentenced to 8 years, Grabinski to 6. But as the BFA story closed, another shadow was growing in Chicago. A shadow that wore a white coat and carried a stethoscope. Part 2, The Foot Doctor's Shadow. Chapter 6, The Good Doctor. Chicago is a city of neighborhoods, and in the late 90s, Dr. Ronald Michos was a king in his own small corner. He was a podiatrist, but to his elderly patients, he was more. He was the man who made house calls. Dr. Michos is here. The elderly women would chirp, putting out tea and biscuits. He was charming. He was attentive. He would trim their toenails and talk about their grandchildren. He was the highest paid podiatrist in Illinois, pulling in $400,000 a year from Medicare. But Pete Tyler, an investigator for the feds, noticed something odd. Look at this patient, Renee, Pete said to Agent Renee Reyes. According to these bills, Dr. Michos performed 35 surgeries on this woman's feet in 1 year. He's billing for surgeries every week. Nobody has that many toes, Reyes muttered. They dug deeper. They found a patient named Charles Labosco. His records showed 351 surgeries. If the bills were true, Labosco's feet should have been a map of scar tissue and metal pins. But when investigators visited the patients, they found something chilling. The patients loved him. Oh, no surgeries, they would say, smiling. He just trims my nails. He's such a good boy. Michos was banking on their frailty. He targeted the demented, the lonely, and the terminal. He knew they wouldn't check their explanation of benefits. He knew they would lie for him because they were afraid to lose the only person who visited them. He even gave them scripts. Tell them I made tiny incisions. Tell them you don't remember because of the anesthesia. Tell them I'm a good doctor. But then he met Joyce Brannon. Chapter 7, The Hero in the Basement. Joyce Brannon was 54, a former ICU nurse. She was sharp, honest, and lived in the basement of the Bethany Evangelical Lutheran Church, where she worked as a caretaker. She was a woman of the Word, and the Word was truth. When the feds showed her the bills, 70 surgeries, she didn't smile. She didn't follow the script. Honey, she told Agent Reyes, I'm a nurse. I know what a surgery is. This man has never put a scalpel to me. This is wrong. She was their star witness. She was the one Michos couldn't manipulate. For days before she was set to testify before a grand jury, Maikos called her. I have a family. Joyce, think about what this will do to me. You should have thought about that before you did this. Ronald, she replied. On a Sunday evening, after the service had ended and the church was quiet, a figure moved through the shadows of the basement. Joyce Brannon was sitting in her chair, facing the window. She never saw the .22 caliber revolver. She was shot 6 times, once point blank. A nurse who had spent her life healing, murdered in the house of God by a doctor she had trusted. Chapter 8. The Fall of the House of Maikos. The murder of Joyce Brannon transformed a white-collar fraud case into a hunt for a killer. The feds found Maikos living in his car. The successful doctor was a shell. He was a prescription drug addict and an alcoholic. He had blown the $1.7 million he'd stolen from Medicare on girlfriends and bad habits. In his car, they found the evidence of his obsession. A Palm Pilot with detailed notes on every agent, a note with the church's service hours, and a single .22 shell casing. During the trial, the prosecution painted a picture of a man who had graduated from theft to blood to protect his pride. She was a hero, the prosecutor told the jury. She stood up when everyone else stayed seated. In 2005, Dr. Ronald Maikos was convicted. For the fraud, he got 6 years. For the murder of Joyce Brannon, he was sentenced to death. Epilogue: The Cost of Faith. In the desert of Arizona, Bill Anderson still carves his ornaments. The BFA is a bitter memory, a lesson learned with retirement money that will never return. In Chicago, the Bethany Evangelical Lutheran Church still stands, but there is a silence in the basement that wasn't there before. They thought they were giving to God. They thought they were trusting a healer. The tragedy of the American greed is not just the loss of the dollar. It is the hollowing out of the soul. It is the realization that the hand reaching out to help you is often the same hand reaching for your throat. But as Robert Shaw walks into his new, non-denominational church, he tries to look past the mirage. He tries to find the water that is real. I'm still angry, he says, looking at the cross, but I'm still here. Shadows of the self, the doctor and the bandit, a novelization of deception and greed. Prologue: The Cost of a Name. The stethoscope is a heavy instrument, not because of its metal and rubber, but because of the weight of the trust it carries. When it presses against a human chest, it is a bridge between a mystery and an answer. But for Gerald Barnbaum, it was something else entirely. It was a prop. It was a golden ticket. He stood in the mirror of his Orange County clinic in 1978, adjusting the crisp, white lapels of a coat that didn't belong to him. On the pocket, stitched in professional blue thread, were the words, Gerald Barnes, M.D. Doctor, he whispered to his reflection. The word felt like silk on his tongue. He wasn't a doctor. He was a pharmacist from Chicago who had lost his license to a Medicaid scam. He was an actor who had traded the stage for the examination room. But in this moment, in this light, he was the savior of Orange County. 400 miles to the north, the real Dr. Gerald Barnes, a respected orthopedic surgeon, was probably scrubbing into surgery, blissfully unaware that his soul, his professional identity, had been harvested like a ripe organ. And further east, on a winding interstate, a man named David Brankel was staring at a map, tracing the lines of the highways like they were veins. He, too, was a doctor of a different sort, a doctor of logistics, a doctor of the quick withdrawal. 2 men, thousands of lies, and a trail of victims who never saw the shadows coming. Part 1, The Sterile Masquerade. Chapter 1, The Disappearing Act. The air in Chicago had been cold, biting, and filled with the scent of failure. For Gerald Barnbaum, the late 1970s had been a period of professional decomposition. The Medicaid fraud investigation had been a messy affair. He had been acquitted, yes, but the medical board had memories longer than a jury's. They took his pharmacy license. They took his livelihood, but they couldn't take his talent. Barnbaum sat in a dim apartment, the walls closing in, and realized he was tired of being a pharmacist. A pharmacist followed orders. A pharmacist was a servant to the doctor's pen. He wanted to be the pen. He moved to California, the land of reinvention. In the sun-drenched sprawl of Orange County, nobody cared who you were yesterday as long as you looked the part today. He began his research. He needed a name that was solid, a name that belonged to a man with credentials he could never earn. He found it in the medical registry, Gerald Barnes. The name was perfect. It was close enough to his own that he wouldn't trip over it in conversation, yet distant enough to provide a fortress of anonymity. The theft was surprisingly simple. A phone call to the Medical Board of California. A practiced, authoritative voice, the voice of a man who had spent hours in community theater perfecting his concerned professional tone. "This is Dr. Gerald Barnes in Stockton," he told the clerk. "I'm opening a second clinic in the South. My original license was damaged during the move. I need a duplicate. No verification. No secondary check. In 1977, trust was the default setting of the world." A week later, a thick envelope arrived. Inside was the parchment that turned a criminal into a healer. By 1978, he was the medical director of the Pacific Southwest Medical Group. He was seeing 30, 40 patients a day. He was earning a 6-figure salary. He was, in his own mind, the greatest actor to ever live, because his audience didn't just clap, they trusted him with their lives. Chapter 2, The Patient in Room 4. December 26, 1979, the day after Christmas. The world was in a holiday hangover, the air thick with the smell of pine and cold grease. Rick D'Alessandro, a physician's assistant, was doing the heavy lifting at the clinic. He liked Dr. Barnes. The man was charming, funny, a likable little guy, as Rick would later recall. Barnes had an ease about him, a way of patting a patient on the shoulder that made them feel like everything was going to be okay. But Rick noticed things, small things, a lack of clinical depth, a tendency to gloss over the complexities of pathology. He brushed it off. Every doctor had their quirks. Then came John Mackenzie. John was 29 years old, a man in the prime of his life, but he walked into the clinic like he was 80. His eyes were sunken, surrounded by dark circles. His skin was sallow, clinging to his cheekbones. "I'm tired, Doc," John said, his voice a raspy whisper. "So thirsty. I drink a gallon of water and I'm still parched. I'm dizzy. The room won't stop spinning." Barnbaum acting as Dr. Barnes looked at John. He didn't see a man in the throes of an acute diabetic crisis. He didn't see the classic symptoms: polydipsia, polyuria, the staggering gait of a body whose blood was turning into syrup. He saw a nuisance on a busy morning. He scribbled on a pad. "Antivert," he said, handing the slip to John. "For the vertigo. It'll help with the dizziness. We'll take some blood, just to be sure. But go home and rest. It's probably just a virus." John Mackenzie took the prescription. He looked at the doctor with eyes full of hope. He trusted the white coat. He trusted the man who wore it. He went home to his kitchen, where the world finally stopped spinning because his heart stopped beating. Chapter 3: The Cold Reality of 1,200. The next morning, the lab results arrived. Rick D'Alessandro was the one who opened the envelope. He stared at the numbers. He blinked, thinking there was a typo. He looked again. Glucose, 1,200 milligrams DL. A normal reading was between 80 and 100. At 1,200, the blood is no longer life-sustaining. It is a toxin. It is a slow-motion car crash of the internal organs. "Where's Barnes?" Rick shouted, looking around the clinic. "He's off today," a nurse replied. Rick grabbed the chart. "We need to call John Mackenzie. Now, this man shouldn't be walking. He should be in an ICU." He called the home number. No answer. He called the emergency contacts, the ex-wife, a friend. Nobody had seen him. A cold dread began to coil in Rick's stomach. He called the Garden Grove Police Department. "Check on him," Rick pleaded. "Please." The officers arrived at the small apartment. They knocked, then pounded. Silence. They kicked the door in. The scent hit them first, the sickly sweet smell of ketoacidosis and the stillness of death. John Mackenzie was on the kitchen floor. In his hand, crumpled like a dying prayer, was the prescription for Antivert. The wrong medicine for the wrong diagnosis from a man who wasn't a doctor. The 29-year-old was dead. And in that moment, the masquerade began to bleed. Chapter 4: The Fractured Identity. Rick D'Alessandro couldn't sleep. The image of those lab results haunted him. He kept asking himself, How could a doctor miss this? A first-year med student would have flagged John Mackenzie as a diabetic emergency. Rick decided to do something a physician's assistant almost never did. He decided to investigate his boss. He called the medical board in Sacramento. "I need the file on Gerald Barnes," he said, "the identification photo, everything you have." The fax machine in the clinic office began to hum. It was a slow, agonizing sound. The paper crawled out inch by inch. Rick picked up the sheet. He looked at the photo. The man in the photo was a stranger. He was an orthopedic surgeon in Stockton. He didn't look like the likable little guy who was currently running the Orange County Clinic. He was older, his features different, his gaze that of a man who actually knew how to save a life. Rick looked through the office window at Dr. Barnes, who was currently chatting with a pharmaceutical rep, laughing at some joke. The realization was a physical blow. The man in the white coat was a ghost, an imposter, a killer. On August 8, 1980, the police arrived. They didn't come for a consultation. They came with handcuffs. Gerald Barnbaum, the actor, didn't break character. Even as they led him away, he maintained a dignified air. He was just a man caught in a big mistake. But the investigators, James Enright and Eddie Banks, weren't looking for an apology. They were looking for a manslaughter charge. They discovered the truth. Barnbaum was a pharmacist who had turned his life into a lethal performance. He pleaded guilty. 3 years, a slap on the wrist for a life stolen. But for the real Dr. Gerald Barnes in Stockton, the nightmare was just beginning. He heard the news on the radio while driving. "Dr. Gerald Barnes arrested for manslaughter. That's my name," he whispered, pulling over to the side of the road. "That's my life." It was a stain that would never fully wash out. Identity, once stolen, is never returned in its original condition. Part 2, The Duality of David Brankel. Chapter 5, The Dapper Gentleman of Bloomington. While Gerald Barnbaum was rotting in a California prison for states away, another man was perfecting his own brand of theater. David Brankel didn't wear a white coat. He wore Italian suits. He wore the confidence of a man who owned the room before he even walked into it. To Phil and Bonnie Sperry in Bloomington, Indiana, David was a godsend, an entrepreneur, an architect of dreams. He was cool, Phil would later remember, impeccably dressed, always had the right answer. Brankel rented an office in the Sperry's building. He called his company a CR Architecture, Construction, and, well, he never told them the R stood for robbery. He was a master of the soft con. He didn't demand money. He invited you to invest in his brilliance. He used the Sperry's name to open accounts at high-end clothing stores. He ran up $8,000 bills at Sullivan's, dressing himself in the finest silks and wools. He looked like $1 million, even though his bank account was a hollow shell. But David had a problem. The suits were expensive, the lifestyle was hungry, and the consulting fees weren't coming in fast enough. He needed a more direct line of credit. He began to study the interstates. I-65, I-70, I-75. To the average traveler, they were just roads. To David Brankel, they were escape routes. He noticed something interesting about grocery stores. They were starting to put mini banks inside them Winn-Dixies, Meijers, Krogers. These bank marts were low security. They were often staffed by young tellers, and they were always located near the highway. It was the perfect business model. Chapter 6. The first withdrawal. The first time is always the hardest. The heart hammers against the ribs like a trapped bird. The palms sweat. The eyes dart. But David Brankel was an actor, much like Barnbaum. He put on a fishing hat-a-boonie hat and a pair of sunglasses. He didn't need a mask. A mask drew attention. A disguise was about blending in, not standing out. He walked into a grocery store in Louisville. He grabbed a loaf of bread, maybe some milk. He stood in the line for the bank kiosk. When it was his turn, he didn't ask for his balance. He handed the teller a note. "This is a hold-up. I have a gun. Be calm. Both drawers. Be quiet. Go home alive." The teller's eyes went wide. The world shifted. In that moment, David wasn't the dapper businessman of Bloomington. He was a predator. He took the money, a few $1,000s. He walked out of the store, not running, just walking. He got into his car and was on the interstate in less than 3 minutes. By the time the police arrived, he was 30 miles away, listening to the radio, his heart rate returning to a steady, professional rhythm. It was so easy, too easy. He returned to Bloomington that night, kissed his wife, played with his son, and went to bed. He was a successful businessman. He had the receipts to prove it. Chapter 7. Bonnie and Clyde to Point Zero. David Brankel's life was a series of compartments. Compartment A, the family man in Vincennes, Indiana. The husband who lived in a rented house at 1919 Hickory Street. The father who brought his son, Michael, to business meetings. Compartment B, the consultant for Logan's Great Escape. He was helping Alan and Becky Logan build a family entertainment complex. He took their retainer fees, their monthly checks, and gave them nothing but colorful charts and empty promises. Compartment C, the boyfriend in Bloomington. From Thursday to Saturday, he stayed with Donna Hewins, a waitress he had met at a topless bar. Donna was the wild card. She was the one who saw behind the curtain. One night, while they were watching a movie about a bank robber, David turned to her. "What would you think of me?" he asked, his voice low. "If I told you this is what I do for a living?" Donna didn't flinch. She didn't call the police. She looked at him with a mixture of awe and desperation. "I would still love you," she said. And just like that, David had a partner, a getaway driver, a witness to his greatness. Donna became his shadow. She would drive the black BMW. She would sit in the parking lot, the engine idling, her eyes fixed on the store exit. She was his Bonnie, though David was far more calculating than Clyde could ever hope to be. They hit 43 banks, 6 states. David became a ghost on the FBI's radar. They called him the Interstate Bank Mart Bandit. They tracked his movements, but he was always one exit ahead. He was using the computers to map out his targets, just as Detective Larry Duncan was using his own computer to try and predict them. It was a digital chess match played at 80 miles per hour. Part 3, The Collision of Realities. Chapter 8, The Revolving Door. Back in California, Gerald Barnbaum, now going by Gerald Barnes again, was proving that a prison sentence is only a temporary intermission for a dedicated performer. He was released after 18 months for good behavior. He walked out of the prison gates, looked at the horizon, and did the only thing he knew how to do. He went to a medical clinic and applied for a job as Dr. Gerald Barnes. It was incredible. It was pathological. He didn't even change the name. He used the same stolen credentials, and he was hired again and again. By 1996, he was the medical director of a clinic in Los Angeles. He was married to a woman named Lisa Roberts. It was very romantic. Lisa would later recall, her voice trembling with the memory of the betrayal. Flowers, dinners, concerts. He turned me right off my feet. Lisa believed she was married to a brilliant physician. She made plans for their future children, a private practice, a house with a garden. She watched him leave every morning in his white coat, a stethoscope draped around his neck like a medal of honor. She didn't know that Dr. Barnes was a 62-year-old con man with a history of manslaughter. She didn't know that more than 100 FBI agents had gone to him for their physicals. The irony was staggering. The very people tasked with catching criminals were being examined by one. He checked their hearts. He checked their lungs. He signed their fitness for duty forms. But the ghost of Rick D'Alessandro was still out there. Chapter 9, The Christmas Party Ghost. In December 1996, the medical community of Los Angeles held a holiday party. It was a sea of suits and cocktail dresses, the air filled with the clinking of glasses and the forced laughter of professional networking. Rick D'Alessandro was there. He had moved on with his career, but he never forgot the face of the man who killed John McKenzie. He was walking through the room when he saw a familiar profile, a likable little guy. Rick looked at the man's lapel. The sticky tag read, "Hi, I'm Dr. Barnes." The world went cold. It had been 16 years. 16 years since the kitchen floor in Garden Grove. And here he was, drinking champagne and pretending to be a healer. Rick didn't make a scene. He waited. He watched. The next day, Rick drove to the clinic where Barnes worked. He walked into the supervisor's office. "Are you aware?" Rick asked, his voice trembling with 16 years of suppressed rage, "that your medical director is a fraud. He's not a doctor. He's an imposter who killed a man." As if summoned by the mention of his name, Barnbaum walked into the room. He saw Rick. His eyes widened for a fraction of a second, the only crack in the mask. Then the smile returned. "Hi, Rick," Barnbaum said, as if they were old college buddies. "How you doing?" "I'm not doing too well, Gerald," Rick replied, "because you're doing the same thing you did back in the 70s. Barnbaum didn't run. Not yet. He leaned against the doorframe. "Well, you know," he said, his voice smooth as oil, "this is all just a big mistake. I can go home and get the information to clear this up. We need you to do that," the supervisor said, the suspicion finally taking root. Barnbaum turned and walked out. He didn't go home for papers. He went home to pack. But this time, the FBI was faster than his disappearing act. Agent Murray Kinjofsky was the one who led the charge. When they arrested him, they found the medical correspondence courses he had taken while in prison. He was a student of the craft, even if he was a master of the lie. When Lisa Roberts heard the news, her world didn't just break, it evaporated. "I didn't know his real name," she said, staring at her wedding photos. "I didn't know his real age. Who had I let share my bed? Who had I trusted?" She realized she hadn't married a man. She had married a character. Chapter 10, The Interstate Trap. While Barnbaum was facing a federal judge in Los Angeles, David Brankel was facing a different kind of pressure. It was 2003. Operation Intercept was in full swing. Detective Larry Duncan had convinced the city of Louisville to put 1,200 officers on alert. Every black BMW heading north toward Indianapolis was a target. Operation Intercept. The sergeant shouted over the radio after hit number 35. Duncan shook his head. "You're blowing it," he whispered to himself. "He's listening. He has a scanner. He's going to slip away." And he did. Brankel avoided the interstates. He took the back roads, weaving through the rural landscape of Kentucky like a needle through cloth. He disappeared into the safety zone of Indiana. But luck is a finite resource. On December 29, 2003, David was driving his black BMW on Highway 45. He was in a hurry. Maybe he was chasing a high, or maybe the walls were finally starting to close in. He sped past a vehicle, cutting it off and nearly causing a head-on collision. The driver of that vehicle wasn't just a civilian. It was Bloomington Police Detective Kevin Hill. "Are you kidding me?" Hill muttered, flipping on his lights. Brankel pulled over. He looked in the rearview mirror. He didn't see a bank robbery task force. He saw a traffic cop. "Hands where I can see them," Hill shouted, approaching the car. Brankel gave him his left hand. His right hand stayed down, hidden by his leg. He was holding a 9mm. "Bring that hand up." Hill drew his service weapon. "Bring it up empty, or I'll fire." David Brankel looked at the detective. The smooth businessman was gone. In his eyes was the frantic, cornered look of a man who had run out of road. "We're okay," Brankel whispered. Then he slammed the car into drive and floored it. The chase reached 100 miles per hour. Brankel was driving through intersections, disregarding stop signs, weaving through traffic with the desperation of a man who knew that if he stopped, the 43 banks would finally catch up to him. He lost the detective in the dust, but he left behind the one thing he couldn't take back: his Indiana driver's license. Chapter 11, The End of the Act. The end didn't happen on a highway. It happened in an apartment complex in Vincennes. Sergeant Greg Winkler and Trooper John Trotter found the black BMW. They found David. He tried to run one last time. He sprinted through the maze of buildings, a small knife in his pocket, his breath coming in ragged gasps. He tripped on a curb. He fell hard, the air leaving his lungs in a wheeze. Winkler was on him in seconds. The handcuffs clicked to cold, metallic finality. "You guys are good," Brankel said, looking up from the grass. "You call Louisville Metro. Call Cincinnati. They'll know who I am." He was proud. Even in defeat, he wanted his audience to know how well he had played the part. In the trunk of his car, they found the inventory of a ghost, suitcases filled with disguises, notes on banks in 6 states, a handgun, and thousands of dollars in stolen cash. The interstate bankmart bandit was no more. David Brankel was sentenced to 21 years. Donna Hewins, his Bonnie, received house arrest and probation. And in a federal prison in Minnesota, Gerald Barnbaum, now 74 years old, was still being Dr. Barnes to his fellow inmates. He had stolen $5 million in fraudulent claims. He had stolen the life of John McKenzie. He had stolen the sanity of Lisa Roberts. And yet, as he walked through the prison yard, he still carried himself with the dignity of a physician. Epilogue: the shadows remain. Identity is a fragile thing. We spend our lives building it, piece by piece, through our choices, our work, and our relationships. But for men like Gerald Barnbaum and David Brankel, identity was just a garment to be worn and discarded. The victims, the real Dr. Barnes, the family of John McKenzie, the Logans, the Sperrys, they were left to pick up the pieces of lives that had been shattered by men who had no conscience. Money, Lisa Roberts would say years later. Follow the money. It was always about greed, but it was about more than that. It was about the power of being someone else. It was about the thrill of the masquerade. In the end, the white coat and the black BMW were just props in a play that had no happy ending. The shadows had finally caught up to the men who cast them, and the interstates were finally quiet. The shadows of deception, a tale of two charlatans. Part 1, The Cost of a Mask. Chapter 1, The Performance of a Lifetime. The air in Orange County, California, usually carried the scent of salt spray and expensive perfume. But inside the Pacific Southwest Medical Group, it smelled of antiseptic and the quiet, rhythmic humming of fluorescent lights. It was 1979, an era of gold chains and wide collars, and for Rick D'Alessandro, it was an era of profound admiration for his boss. Dr. Gerald Barnes was more than a doctor. He was a presence, He was a compact man, radiating a warmth that seemed to fill every room he entered. To the patients, he was a savior. To Rick, a young physician's assistant, Barnes was a mentor who navigated the complexities of human biology with the grace of a seasoned conductor. He was just so engaging, Rick would later recall, his voice heavy with the bitterness of hindsight. A funny little guy. You couldn't help but like him. On that Tuesday morning, the clinic was humming with its usual frantic energy. Gerald Barnes sat behind his mahogany desk, the stethoscope draped around his neck like a priestly stole. He looked every bit the part the framed degrees on the wall, the authoritative tilt of his head, the way he scribbled prescriptions with a flourish that suggested absolute certainty. But behind the spectacles and the benevolent smile lay a void. The man sitting in that chair was not Dr. Gerald Barnes. He was Gerald Barnbaum, a failed pharmacist from Chicago with a history of Medicaid fraud and a theater degree gathering dust in his memory. For Barnbaum, medicine wasn't a calling, it was a stage. And in Orange County, he had finally found his starring role. He had learned the language of healing. He knew how to palpate an abdomen, how to listen to a heart, and how to nod sympathetically as a